Thank you for joining us today on behalf of ASCE, American Society of Civil Engineers, as well as the National Municipal Stormwater Alliance, NMSA. My name is Seth Brown. I'm the Executive Director of NMSA, and we really appreciate you being here today to celebrate and recognize the second inclusion of stormwater as a separate infrastructure sector in the ASCE Infrastructure Report Card. Our agenda today is we're going to provide Darren Olson, who's on the screen right there. He will provide you with some background on the report card, the methodology, and all the details on the context there. Then we're going to talk about resilience. That's going to be Carol Haddock with the ASCE, and then we're going to be talking about O&M, operations and maintenance, and that's Jamie Houle. Scott Taylor with NMSA will be talking about capacity issues and the criterion for that in the report card. And then lastly, Kurt Wolford with ASCE will be rounding things out with funding and future need specific information and the criterion associated with that. And just so everyone gets a good look at the amazing people that we have on this this webinar. You can see from left to right with Darren Olson, Carol Haddock, Jamie Houle, Scott Taylor, and Kurt Wolford. So we have a great array of professionals here in this event, and we appreciate their participation, and we appreciate everyone else joining us here today. A little bit before we get going, before handing it off to Darren, I want to talk a little bit about some housekeeping. First of all, this webinar is being recorded. It will be made available for free. That link will be provided after the fact in an email that will be sent to you. The PDF, actually the slides is already available. It says will be made available. It actually is available in the handout section of your GoToWebinar app. Also, there is the Stormwater Report Card section of the overall ASCE report card, so you can download that as a PDF as well. There are 1.5 PDHs available, and you'll get a certificate with that information automatically after this event is done. I think it takes like a day or so for these to come out, so it's not. So don't email us right away. Give us a day or so to get those out. If you have questions, please send your questions, and we'd love to have those questions because we are going to have a Q&A session at the end of this. But when you send those questions and use the questions area, not the chat area, and also when you do that, make sure you have a specific person that you want that question directed to. And again, if you have any kind of technical questions or issues or technological, issues, let us know via the chat function. So I think that covers everything for us. So without further ado, I'm going to hand this over to Darren. I think we're all going to turn our cameras off, and we're going to let Darren take things and go forward from here.
Thank you, Seth. Hello, and thanks everyone for the opportunity to speak with you today about the nation's infrastructure. It's an issue that impacts every American and is critical to our economy and way of life. Today we're here to focus primarily on stormwater. I'm Darren Olson. I'm the chair of the Committee on America's Infrastructure with ASCE, and we produced the report card. And I'm also one of the authors of the stormwater chapter of the report card. Today we'll start by detailing the findings from the 2025 report card for America's infrastructure, with an emphasis on stormwater before going into real-world stormwater examples that touches on each one of the grading criteria. So what do we mean by infrastructure, and why is it critical to every American? America's infrastructure is a foundation on our national economy, global competitiveness, and the quality of life depend. While infrastructure is often out of sight, out of mind, when there are deficiencies, we all feel the impact. And certainly that can be said about stormwater systems, because most people don't know they exist until we flood. Infrastructure is more than pipes and roads and bridges. It's also the airports we use for travel, the schools our children attend, the parks we enjoy, the water we drink, the public transit we ride, the power that keeps the lights on, and so much more that impacts our daily lives. As the nation's oldest civil engineering society, representing 160,000 civil engineers who serve as stewards of infrastructure here in the U.S. and around the globe, ASCE serves as a leading advocate for infrastructure. Using an A to F report card format, the report card gives a thorough assessment of the current infrastructure conditions and needs, evaluating 18 criteria based on evaluating 18 categories based on 8 key criteria. So I'll go over the specifics of our grading criteria and the stormwater category, but first let's reveal the grades. Next slide, Seth, please. For the first time ever, America's cumulative GPA is a C, the highest it has ever been. And for the first time since 1998, no category received a D- grade. This GPA improves slightly from a C- in 2021, indicating we've made some progress around the margins in some infrastructure areas. In fact, grades either increased or stayed the same in 16 of our 18 categories. Since ASCE's last report card 4 years ago, the new grades in 2025 demonstrate that investment in infrastructure makes a difference. Landmark federal infrastructure legislation has initiated thousands of critical projects across the country. The 2021 Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or IIJA, was the largest comprehensive infrastructure spending package in U.S. history, accounting for $1.2 trillion in infrastructure investments over the course of 5 years, with more than $550 billion of that funding allocated to brand new programs. And the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, passed in 2022, marks the largest climate investment in U.S. history, and has helped facilitate the nation's transition to renewable energy sources. Investments in resilient infrastructure are consistently proven to be an effective use of limited public dollars, as they reduce costs in the long term, especially by minimizing rebuilding needs after a significant event. By adopting the most up-to-date codes and standards, communities will be better equipped to handle disasters and most responsibly deploy public resources. Yet despite these positive trends, 9 categories are in the D range, and those include infrastructure Americans use every day, like roads, transit, and energy. And stormwater is one of the lowest categories at D, in the D range, and it's shared that D grade with transit. 8 categories: dams, hazardous waste, inland waterways, levees, ports, public parks, roads, and transit all benefited from increased federal funding, and upgrades were made. Next slide, please. The report card demonstrates the crucial need for the new administration and Congress to continue sustained investment in infrastructure and build on progress made to improve infrastructure after decades of deferred funding and underinvestment. Some overarching trends impacting infrastructure include extreme weather events, the need for sustained investments, and the need for reliable and available data on key performance indicators. These trends certainly ring true in the stormwater category, as we'll hear about in the upcoming presentations. Better infrastructure is an efficient investment of taxpayer dollars that results in a stronger economy and prioritizes American jobs, resiliency, and connectivity. After releasing this report 7 times previously, this is the first time for a C grade, the highest that was ever awarded. While this showcases how investment creates direct results, there is still work to be done, with a great need for sustained investments to save families time and money and improve unsafe conditions. Next slide, please. A little bit about the report card methodology. The report card is prepared by ASCE Committees on America's Infrastructure with 52 civil engineers and infrastructure professionals from across the country with decades of experience across the 18 categories. With ASCE staff, the committee evaluates relevant national data and reports from government agencies, the private sector, nonprofits, and other organizations, and meets with technical and industry experts to gain a wider view of the nation's infrastructure. The committee then examines each category in the context of 8 key criteria that we're going to talk a lot about today. And that allows us to determine the grade. These criteria are capacity, condition, funding, future need, operation and maintenance, public safety, resilience, and innovation. Next slide, please. And ASCE has descriptions to help classify each grade. This doesn't make you feel very good when you recall that stormwater grade is a D. That means nationwide, our stormwater systems are in poor condition. The committee also makes recommendations to raise the grades for the nation's infrastructure broadly and specifically in each of the 18 different categories. Now that we've had a chance to overview the grading process and with some key themes, I'll quickly go through some of the key report card findings from the stormwater chapter before turning it over to our other presenters. Next slide, please, Seth. Oops, one more, please. Oh, there we go. All right. So some of you may recall, the stormwater category was first added in 2021 and was given a D grade, which remains the same in 2025. Big thanks to WEF that partnered with us early on to produce the data that allowed us to develop this first stormwater grade back in 2021. And I'll be citing some of their data here. Looking at some of the national trends that we saw over the past 4 years, in the capacity criteria, we saw an increase in capacity of green and gray infrastructure funded through the Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund programs. But we saw headwinds in this category, the more frequent and severe storms. The next two categories I've lumped together, condition and operation and maintenance. We saw our miles of impaired streams increase across the nation from 588,000 to 703,000. Which was a negative, but at the same time, we saw a slight increase in stormwater utilities with maintenance plans. MS4s are starting to utilize asset management plans, which hits on one of the key trends of the report card that talks about lack of available data. So we're starting to make a small amount of progress there, but much more to be done. Next slide, please, Seth. In the funding and future need category, we saw the 20-year capital needs balloon from $23.8 billion in 2012 to $115.3 billion in 2022. And most of us would agree that these figures are probably quite low. We did see a small allocation to the water sector from IIJA, but it was small in comparison to what was given to surface transportation. The funding gap has partially been made up in the stormwater category here by fees charged by utilities, which are on the rise. In the public safety and innovation categories, we saw a sharp increase in the frequency of severe disasters, costing more than $1 billion. But conversely, on the innovation side, NOAA's Atlas 15 is being developed to update our nation's rainfall data nationwide and should be fully available in 2027. And finally, in the resilience category, we found that only 26% of municipalities use updated design standards and specifications to address climate change and stormwater resilience. So that's one category where we saw some slippage when compared to 2021. So speaking of resilience, the upcoming speaker is the incoming president-elect of ASCE, Carol Haddock. She's here to talk specifically about her experience with resilience in her career, including as the Director of Public Works for the City of Houston. And with that, I'll turn it over to Carol.
Thanks, Darren. It is my honor to be here today, and we can go ahead and jump into the next slide. I'm going to give you as quick as I can, but as thorough as I can, an overview of stormwater resilience and some of the things that we considered in looking at these chapters and grading them, but also give you real-world examples of how those are in place. There is no doubt that we are seeing harsher conditions, that we're seeing more frequent, more intense weather. This is kind of just a checklist of what we're going to go through. We know that resilience is better when we use an above all the above approach, that we include green and gray infrastructure, that we look at those land use practices. We look at, we even look at using stormwater as a solution to drought by looking at those relations to others' resilience. We know that our emergency action plans, that an emergency, as unfortunate and undesirable as it is, an emergency is often the most opportune time to implement resilience so that people don't go through this again. And then just a reminder, you're going to hear this from me now, you heard it from Darren, only 26% of municipalities use updated design and specifications to address day-to-day and to address disasters. So that means that we're allowing things to be built today that are impacting, that will not be prepared and stand ready for the next disaster. Let's go ahead and jump into the next slide. You can find this online. This is from the NOAA website. But when we talk about that need for resilience, the data doesn't lie. You can be a naysayer about many things that you want to be in life, but the data does not lie. We have more frequent, we have more costly disasters happening throughout the United States. These are actually CPI adjusted, so you can't say that it's just a look at, things cost more. Now, we have more people in harm's way. That 5-year average is up to 150 billion per year during 2024 when we look at disasters. Go ahead and jump into the next slide. But that includes all disasters. It's wildfires, it's tornadoes, it's windstorms, it's everything. But when you pull out just the flooding, you still see that that is a significant component, and it's not new. It varies from year to year, but when we have those disasters, they are significant. And you see, if you look back, to 97, you see 2016, 2019, 2024. We see that they are definitely even more frequent in what we're seeing in that. Jump into the next slide, please. So when we talk about resilience and we talk about reducing flood risk, there are most things that stay in the government realm. Those zoning standards, building codes, evacuation plans, all those things. How do we tackle this? It has to be your local government that does that. When we look at this resilience and we look at this flood risk reduction, resilience, the best way you can do this is to avoid the damage in the first place. But for most of us, we're already here. Our buildings are already here, our people are already here. Avoidance is not necessarily something that is an option on the table to us every single day. But how do we reduce that impact? And if we can't reduce that impact, how do we harden the structures against what may be coming their way? Or in some cases, how do we flat out just abandon it? So let's jump into building codes, why we're going to avoid. Let's go to the next slide. When I was working for the city of Houston and we were looking at updating our building codes, one of the startling statistics we found was that 2 out of 3 places prone to severe weather, and that's, coast, it can be tornado alley, it can be any of these things, hurricanes, earthquakes, don't have the building codes that they need to make sure that investments in future buildings are built to withstand the disasters that we know will be present today. So if you think about that, we talked about the 26% of municipalities that only 26% have updated design standards. Let's think about that in terms of 3 out of 4 municipalities do not have design standards or specifications to meet today's disasters, to avoid putting people in harm's way. That's why resilience is important. Next slide, please. So when we look at this next slide, it is an image of a wind disaster, but it's very important for us to visually see it. And a lot of times we have to put these kind of things up. For a community to become resilient, they have to decide that they will not allow new development to become part of the existing problem. That doesn't mean that we need to fully abandon areas. I mean, this image is actually a really good example. If you look at retrofitting, if you look at, with flooding, it's hard. If you're too low, it's hard, but it demonstrates that we can change building codes, we can reinvest in areas, and that we can build resilience even in existing development. Let's go on to the next slide. So I told you I would tell you a little bit about my history from Houston. So what are the challenges that we faced in Houston? If you look at the photo on the left, you'll see a wastewater treatment plant. This was actually taken during Hurricane Harvey. That treatment facility was inundated that way for more than 2 weeks. It is still in service today. It was not hardened to the extent that it needed to be during Hurricane Harvey. Much of the activities that needed to allow it to be hardened have been done after the fact. But picking up and moving a wastewater treatment plant is probably not something that's going to happen. So how do we reduce the impact? How do we do it in a way that we are going to make sure that next time that the damage isn't as bad, because there will be a next time. The image on the right is actually from an early 2000 storm, Tropical Storm Allison, where we had very wide neighborhood flooding. And one of the reasons that I bring both of these examples up is they're 20 years apart, and yet they had similar impacts on the community. So let's go ahead and flip to the next slide. And we'll talk about mitigation, because mitigation needs to be a key component of any resilience that somebody is doing. We all know that for every dollar spent on mitigation and in new code construction, it saves $11 in disaster repair and recovery costs. And it's not just the $11. And I've been hearing $12 recently. It's not just the money that it saves. What it saves is it saves your community, the people that live in your community, from experiencing that disaster the same way, from losing family heirlooms, from losing lives, from losing things that are not replaceable, but also losing things that are replaceable. One of the things in Houston that a local university think tank put together was how are our families prepared for disaster recovery, and they found out that more than half of Houstonians did not have $400 to go spend a night in a hotel during a disaster. They didn't have that cash available in their pocket. And so it is definitely one of those things that as you look at this, we know in wildfire wind mitigation, it saves $4 for every $1 invested. So it's really bigger than just the individual investment. It's truly the impact to your community. Let's jump to the next slide here real quick. So in Houston, what were the resiliency tools that we used on a daily basis? We used elevation grants, and I know that some of those may not be available moving forward. We used the concept of demo rebuild, whether it was a grant or whether it was self-funded. And then in some cases, we used buyouts. So let's jump on to the next deal. But an important thing about that is we were talking about these different tools. We were always talking about engaging with the community and understanding what the community wanted. The picture on the left is actually a house that was elevated. It was elevated almost 8 feet. It is in an area that is a wide, shallow floodplain. And it is a community that's very well developed, and there were some houses in it that were lower than others. It was pretty widespread. The picture I showed you earlier is not the same community, but in this case, elevating these specific structures put them above the floodplain and allowed them to stay in the community that they were in. But if you jump over to the right, so we reduced their risk of flooding, but if you jump over to the right, we had townhomes that were flooded up into the second floor in the riparian area of the San Jacinto River. And in that case, buyout ended up being the better option, not just because hardening those or figuring out a way to stay there was not possible, but because the sheer danger of being in those structures and not being able to get emergency responders in, or even should we put emergency responders in that situation for those areas that were in the riparian zone along the bank of a river. So the community made a choice to actually abandon that area and return it to green space. Let's jump to the next slide. This is one of those examples that I love to share around the world when I get an opportunity. It's a tale of 3 storms. On the left, you have Tropical Storm Allison, and I don't know, I lost my circles on this. They may come up on the next, but they may not. But if you look on the left, this is basically the same place, and it looks fully developed. And you can kind of see the dark area in the center, that's a park, and you can see that same dark area in the center on the right. And below that dark area, on the left, there was a subdivision. We had people that were literally rescued off rooftops during Tropical Storm Allison, which was in 2001. We bought out the flood control district. The local flood control district literally bought out all of those homes. Some of them were voluntary. Some of them were ended up being mandatory buyouts, but they finished that. And then Hurricane Ike, which hit Houston in 2008, we were able to use pre-disaster mitigation funding that was generated through part of Hurricane Ike and actually dig the detention basin that you see in the right photo. So you can see where that community was, and then you can see where that detention basin is today. And what we saw in Hurricane Harvey in 2017 is we saw significantly less flooding in that area along Halls Bayou. I put this up here because resiliency is not a short-term process. It is something that takes you a while to get from where you are to where you're going to be. If you're putting in codes for new development, it can be instantaneous. But when you're dealing with existing flooding and you're dealing with this existing communities, it is a long-term commitment to deliver resilience into your communities. The next slide that I want to advance to is a hardened example. And those are rare. Those are rare that we have a hardened example because you don't typically, oh, look, there are the circles. The hardened example is actually the Texas Medical Center. So the Texas Medical Center is a complex in Houston that treats over 7 million patients a year. It's home of the MD Anderson Cancer Center. It's Ben Taub, Memorial Hermann, Methodist, St. Luke's, multiple Baylor colleges of medicine, UT College, UT Health Science Center, College of Medicine, Baylor College of Medicine. So we're training doctors, we're treating patients, and it happens to be in an area that has experienced flooding in the past. During 2001 Tropical Storm Allison, the hospital was severely, the hospital complex, the Texas Medical Center was severely impacted. Pretty much every building in the facility was, as one of the hospital executives said, it was broken in one way or another. The tunnels that connected the hospitals to each other allowed flooding to get from one building to another once it entered one of the buildings. We had absolutely irreplaceable research that was lost as part of this flooding. We had, 20 plus year cancer strains that were in research studies. We had, no matter how you feel about it, we had laboratory animals that were housed in those facilities that were lost. It was the estimate was in the billions just in the physical losses. You cannot put a value on the other losses. And then once you even add on top of that, patients had to be evacuated. People did lose their lives. They were without power. They were without the ability to get in and out. And fast forward to 2017, and what's happened between 2001 and 2017 is a combination of approaches to create resilience. The medical center partnered with the city of Houston to work on the storm drainage around the medical center. There were very large box culverts put that took one area down to the bayou around it. There was actually a stormwater tunnel built adjacent to the medical center. They looked internally. They created what we call the submarine doors, where they literally can wall off different areas from the parking garages, from the buildings. They put plans in place to practice, to drill, to exercise. They run them all the time. And then they also partnered with research. Directly across the street is Rice University, and the Rice University Speed Center worked with them on sensors and data and predictive radar to help them know when they need to deploy measures. And when you get to 2017 and you get to all those different pieces, yes, they were an island, but the streets were on, the lights were on, the streets were not passable, but the emergency helicopters could still get in. Every patient was still being treated. They still had potable water. They still had everything that they needed to stay in operation and keep their patients safe during Hurricane Harvey. And that's the type of resilience that communities are looking at. So whether it's an individual neighborhood, an individual house, or a large area, those are the types of things. So if we'll go ahead and jump to the last couple of slides here before I wrap this up and hand it back to Seth. Houston looks at resilience not just in stormwater. We actually developed a Resilient Houston plan under the previous mayor, Mayor Turner. And one of the things that they did was they went out and talked to everybody in the community about what they saw as resilience. It's not just about the physical resilience against stormwater. It is actually the resilience of day-to-day life. It's the resilience of where you live, where you work, where you shop, and all those things. And this word jumble on the left is actually what we saw from the community that provided us input on that. And if we go to the last slide, one of the great things about a resilience framework, and any community can do this, everybody's out there working in their silos. But one of the things that this framework did was it created that opportunity for us to create a connection between all these different initiatives that were going on, whether it was for the homeless initiative, whether it was the Metro's transit initiative, whether it was a local community garden, whether it was the capital improvement plan, whether it was, whether it was big or whether it was small. It was this framework that all of these things could be tied together and work towards that same goal. So for us, it was that capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems within our urban environment to survive, adapt, and thrive, no matter what types of chronic stresses or acute shocks came our way. So as each of you looks in your communities at looking at stormwater resilience, I would make sure that you think about resilience as a whole community, and that you deploy those activities and you ask those questions in a way of how does every dollar that we invest lead towards resilience in our community, not just that they're not going to flood, but that they're going to be able to walk to the local park or walk to their doctor's appointment or drive to their doctor's appointment, or they're not going to stress about the fact that the roads are flooded and they're trying to get to daycare before it closes so that they don't get charged extra because floodwaters got in their way. You have to think about all those things when you're thinking about resilience. And I'm going to hand this back to Seth now, who's going to hand it off so that we can get into the nuts and bolts of stormwater systems. But I just wanted to set a framework for resilience and how all this infrastructure fits into what we do in communities. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. That was great. I appreciate that. And we've got a lot of great questions. And for folks, keep sending those in, please, for us. And we are going to hopefully we can have time for a robust Q&A session. So keep sending those questions in. And again, when you send your questions in, please identify who that question should be directed towards. So, okay, so for the next section, we're going to have Jamie Houle talk about operations and maintenance and then how that ties in with the stormwater sector. Take it away.
Great, thanks, Seth. You can advance to the next slide. So yeah, it's my honor to be here to help introduce this formative and very special resource that we have as practitioners in the stormwater field. I'm going to talk a little bit about operation and maintenance. And of course, one of the fundamental things that we know is that performance and efficiency of this, the built infrastructure that we have on the stormwater side can deteriorate over time. Naturally, they are resilient in that they often lack energy inputs. They're very passive and they benefit from that. But we know that performance and efficiency deteriorates over time. And we also know from the 2022 National MS4 Needs Assessment is that more than 60% of the surveyed utilities cited aging infrastructure and workforce and staffing needs as one of the critical challenges that face them in properly managing functioning stormwater systems. One other thing to kind of point out is in the 2022 Clean Water Needs Survey, stormwater management needs were identified with a fiscal need of over $115.3 billion. That's billion with a B. That's a 385% increase over the 2012 survey, and we think that probably underestimates still the needs. It's important to note that operation and maintenance was not included in that price tag. So operation and maintenance is something that, again, it's hard to capture, and it's hard to develop a metric on what the true need is. We know many of these systems suffer from lack of operation and maintenance. Next slide. And certainly we know that as we move into the uncertainty of future precipitation changes, we want to know that at least the built infrastructure that we have serving us with respect to stormwater is operational and is effectively at capacity. So having an under capacity system is only going to lead to more vulnerabilities. So under the National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System, the NPDES program, all MS4s, all permitted communities are required to have maintenance plans for their stormwater systems. This is something that's advancing thanks to these more progressive permit requirements. From 2018 to 2021, the number of stormwater utilities developing and implementing maintenance plans increased from 38% to 42%. We feel like, this is one of the truly measures out there to meet this ongoing need with sustainable financing through a utility. There is a disparity between the phase 1 communities, obviously, because they've been at this for longer than the phase 2 communities, where only 63% of the phase 1 communities are utilizing asset management to track and oversee inspection and maintenance operations, but only 35% of the phase 2 communities report using them. So this is a huge area, both on the utility side, developing more utilities and more sustainable financing for stormwater operations, and the increasing use of asset management. And asset management tracking software is one of the identified measures to continue to advance the grade and the metrics pertaining to inspection and maintenance. Next slide. So I mentioned that inspection maintenance is not a cost category that was included in the Clean Watershed Needs Survey. We know that the consequences of no maintenance or even deferred maintenance increase the vulnerability. And certainly as we move into the uncertainty of changing precipitation patterns, this is only going to be make our communities less resilient. And we also know that there's also this changing pattern in the US that the number of impaired streams and the lengths of those rivers and streams have increased over the last decade, from more than 588,000 in 2018 to over 703,000 miles of impaired stream in 2022. So as we look into the future, this is another area that we need more investment and more work to create more resilient infrastructure. Next slide. So now I'll hand it over to Scott Taylor to talk about capacity criterion.
If you're available, and again, questions that are coming in, please, I want to mention to identify who the questions are, and also the shorter the better. Jamie, just since if you can get joined real quickly, since you're a little bit short on your time, which is great. There's a question that came in about the ASCE and WEF published in 2022 the first national manual of practice on urban stormwater controls and O&M. Do you have any thoughts on that that document and anything that can be taken away? Are you aware of that document, and did you have input on it?
Yeah, that was published by the members of the Resiliency Committee. It's a useful document for sure. I think, realistically, we need more investment at the municipal level. There's lots of plans and strategies to advance inspection and maintenance, but I think planning for it and actually implementing it are two different things. So we need the operational expertise of people that are doing this on a day-to-day basis to weigh in and adjust and give shape to templates. So I don't think we've ever suffered from a lack of information on the need around inspection and maintenance, but the doing part and allowing for the actually activities of doing that on a day-to-day basis to inform and enhance the operational strategies, I think is is really going to generate a kind of a renaissance with respect to inspection and maintenance in the stormwater.
That's
side.
interesting. Well, on that same or a similar topic, question came in asking about if there's any kind of matrix for prior or anything like available, like a matrix or something like that, if that's available for prioritizing funding that's shared between or split between costs for building. So I think we're talking about capital versus O&M. And how does that tie in? You know, if we're looking at the same site, how do we look at capital costs versus O&M costs? How much does that vary? How can we reduce the amount of O&M costs versus capital costs? Or any ways to look at that? Or I know that you have a lot of on the ground experience on that.
Yeah, so we've always been looking for these kind of rules of thumb of how to gauge maintenance. And so historically, I guess the best approach is a percentage of the capital costs of the system. So whether that's 3% or 5%, but that really doesn't speak well to the actual needs. And of course, the long-term operation and maintenance needs of stormwater structural controls really relies on what path that you take. You know, are you taking more conveyance, or are you adopting more green infrastructure style strategies? That really differentiates your maintenance scheme. So I look at it as almost a culture, and what culture are you set up to manage? And so we look to, you know, folks like, you know, like Austin that has really implemented bioretention systems or sand filters and shaped their municipal systems around maintaining those. You know, it's gonna benefit them to continue in that respect. One of the things that we see often happens is that a municipality buys into, say, subsurface things or things that they don't really have capacity to maintain, which is something that, again, as you update your regulations and bring them into, you know, this new 21st century of stormwater management, you want to be cognizant of the type of equipment and the type of maintenance culture that you're, I guess, building in your community, and make sure that you're asking for developers to implement those styles of systems that take advantage of that culture.
Excellent. All right, Jamie, thank you. There's other questions, but I think we can save those to the end. So appreciate that. And we'll move on to Scott Taylor with capacity. Take it away, Scott.
All right, thanks a lot, Seth. Let's go ahead and advance the slide, try to get ahead of the lag a little bit here. So I'm going to talk about capacity, and that's really, I think, one of the most important criteria, because if you're not performing in terms of capacity, that's really the fundamental reason why you have most of our infrastructure categories, that you want to deliver the service or the protection to the public. So capacity's been kind of viewed then as a legacy problem, right? In the 40s and 50s, we built things that had probably 5 and 10 years of level of protection, certainly not up to current standards. In the 60s and 70s, we realized that we really couldn't just look at a development in a box, that it was having impacts downstream and then also on the receiving streams that took the runoff from that development. So then in the 80s and 90s, we started looking at detention as the solution. If we built detention basins and reduced the peak flow, usually for just one return period, say like 25-year or 100-year, that we were going to be good to go. But we started to see impacts from detention basins, where that was reducing sediment from the system and then causing scour in the receiving streams. So today, you know, this has become a much more sophisticated kind of approach to these problems and to capacity. We're looking at urban hydrology now, stream impacts, various return periods, and also water quality, as some of our other speakers have mentioned. And so this is all against a backdrop then of climate change, or whatever you term of art that you want to use for that. You know, traditionally engineers have looked at stationarity in hydrology, essentially that the past can be used to predict the future, and we're finding that that really isn't how nature is working. So the approach now, and why we spent some time, why Carol spent so much time on it, is really resilience. We can't keep changing our hydrology standards or increasing our level of protection, but what we can do is make infrastructure more resilient, have the downtime and the damage from these extreme events be less. So go ahead and move to the next slide, Seth. It was interesting that Carol mentioned that, since that is kind of, in my opinion, the strategy that we have, 3 out of 4 cities in the US don't have resiliency standards. So I think that's one of the good things about this report card, is kind of point out some of those deficits. But specifically for the national report card, in order to assess, where is the nation in terms of flood protection and in terms of capacity, we're interested in the national criteria, which is the Federal Emergency Management Agency and FEMA. You can see here, FEMA criteria is that in terms of the BFE, the base flood elevation, the habitable structure needs to be at or above that. Now, in your local area, it may be 1 foot above the BFE or 2 foot above the BFE for the finished floor of the structure, but that is the national criteria. You have to be above the mapped base flood elevation, which is a storm with a 1% chance of occurring in any given year, or what we call the 100-year storm. So the report card then is assessing what percentage essentially of the country is out of the 100-year floodplain and reporting that, and telling us which areas or which states don't provide this level of service, and providing a grade accordingly. By contrast, the state report cards are looking more at local drainage systems and how those are performing. So it makes sense, right? You have the local report cards looking more at the local and more granular storm drainage issues, whereas the national report card is looking more at the national criteria and FEMA. So part of, and I think you can go to the next slide here, Seth, part of the drainage infrastructure function is to comply, as I think Jamie mentioned, with the MS4 NPDES program. To do this, we looked at the percent of runoff that is treated or infiltrated or reused. I mentioned that stormwater needs are a legacy problem, and that's definitely true for stormwater quality, because there was just very little treatment provided prior to, the NPDES program came out in the early 90s, and nobody really got around, I think, to having treatment of stormwater until really in a significant way the 2000s. So obviously we're playing catch up here. Most of our built environment does not have water quality infrastructure. So we're going to need to make some really, really big investments to retrofit the existing infrastructure to comply with NPDES standards. And there's a couple of tools you can take a look at. Really, there hasn't been a lot of information up until now about what that deficit is. But if you take a look at the EPA's Clean Watershed Needs Survey, just came out. I think Darren mentioned that was 115 billion with a B that we need to spend over the next 20 years. And then Jamie mentioned the WEF MS4 survey, and this comes out every couple of years, and that was looking at $6 to $8 billion per year deficit that the NPDES programs are underfunded. And just my personal opinion is that all of these survey numbers are low. They don't reflect what the actual number really would be to bring up to the standards that we have on the books. So go ahead to the next slide, Seth. So that's really fundamentally, and I'll talk a little bit more about this in the closing, but fundamentally where we are is that we need money to address not only the capacity problem, but for sure the water quality problem. So this slide shows really how we look at drainage on the local level, how it works in terms of streets and how the streets relate to the habitable structures, and that you want to be above the base flood elevation from that. Again, the big challenge here is going to be retrofitting, like you see in this picture, streets that are already built like this for water quality. How am I going to do that on an economical basis, a practical basis, and a functional basis that is going to serve both the environment and not break the bank? So this is going to take time, and this is going to take money. So that's a quick overview of drainage capacity and how that's assessed in the stormwater report card. I don't know if Seth's going to have any questions right now. If not, we're going to transition over to funding and Kurt. So
yeah,
I'll
there
leave
are
it to
some
you,
questions, Scott, to discuss that have come in. One question came up about design specifications for, and this ties in with resilience, but it also ties in, I think these are so closely aligned that I think in the capacity side, we want to, I mean, what we plan and we design for capacity, right? That's what a lot of what we're designing for, hydraulic capacity and also treatment capacity. The question came in about, do you know of any national, so the specific question was about, has ASCE or NMSA, have we, groups like us, have we developed any design specs or any information on design specs, guidance on that, whatnot, related to resilience, design in the future? And I'll say from NMSA, we haven't done that. I don't know if ASCE has done that. Do you know of any, Scott, anything like that? I know the state level, there's been some communities like that, but I don't know if there's any national groups that have done that.
There is some national stuff. I think, and I'm not going to be the guy that knows everything on this, but I think FHWA has done some good work in resilience because, they're looking at this. Also, the National Cooperative Highway Research Program has done some good work in terms of looking at where do we go from here in terms of climate change. Do we, again, keep changing our hydrology to reflect some of these problems, or do we go to more resilient designs? And this gets really complicated. You're downscaling these big climate change models to try to apply at the local level in terms of what am I going to see over the next 100 years. So that's one. There's kind of that approach, looking at where the hydrology is going, and then there's also the resiliency approach, which is where I think we need to head. Again, we can't keep designing for bigger and bigger storms or more intense storm events, I guess, trying to predict the future. I think we need to make the infrastructure we have more resilient. So I don't know. Looks like Carol may have some other info on
I was going to
this.
say, and Darren popped up too. I mean, you started talking stormwater standards, and we're like, woohoo!
Yeah.
So ASCE 7 is definitely, I will say that ASCE is in the standards business. We have been in the past, we are in the present, and we will be in the future, working to develop and deploy and make available those standards that directly address our research. The flood standards came out as an addendum to the last one. The International Building Code just recently agreed to include that in the 27 version. So there are some performance standards out there that are available for communities, and we have an amazing number of experts that would be happy to help guide communities on how to deploy those. And Darren, I will let you weigh in on this as well if you want to add some more to that, because there's a group that's way more technical than me that is in the standards on a daily basis.
Yeah, Carolyn, I was going to also mention ASCE has I don't know if I call it like a publication or it's Pathways to Resilient Communities, designing infrastructure for environmental hazards in your region. It's a really good toolkit. It's a toolkit to guide civil engineers and community leaders and how to bring resilience into up-to-date modern building codes and standards in response to things like severe storms. So that's another thing you could look at, and Seth, I'll provide you a link to this document as well. It's called Pathways to Resilient Communities. It's a great one.
And I would be remiss if I didn't say Envision. The Envision infrastructure certification process also is a framework through which resilience is considered in evaluating infrastructure. And that's not individual homes, it's public infrastructure projects, but there's a framework within Envision for that resilience is considered as well.
Yeah, I think an unrelated, I guess, topic or question is, I think going back to capacity and the tie to resilience, and then a question came in on this too. I think the assumption is the way that we increase our resilience is to increase our hydraulic capacity. But we have to think about out of the box thinking too. Like there are some areas, for instance, that we just can't continue because of cost, maybe physical constraints and whatnot. We just can't make everything bigger. That's just not a feasible approach. The question is about, are there any kind of design paradigms that are addressing or acknowledging or recognizing that sometimes we have to let some areas flood, and that that is resilience. It's also some kind of capacity for storage, I guess you call it, but not necessarily capacity for hydraulic passage. Any thoughts on these things, either Scott or Carol?
Yeah, well, I can take a shot first. I mean, let's take an example of like a bridge, right? Say the low chord of the bridge is above the 100-year, even the 1,000-year, but what happens is that the bridge approaches flood, right? The water goes around, the bridge is perched, then water pours over the approaches and then back into the channel. So a resilient design on that would understand that. It would understand that, hey, we can't make the bridge twice as wide so that everything goes under the bridge. And we're gonna allow those bridge approaches to flood, but we're gonna, one, keep the amount of time that happens down to the absolute minimum. Maybe it's only an hour or two. Number two, we're gonna make sure that those bridge approach slopes are armored so that they aren't, the fill coming up to the bridge isn't undercut and all gone, and then it's weeks before you can put that bridge back into service. In other words, as soon as the flood recedes, maybe you scrape a little mud off the approach and it's back in service, it's ready to go. And to do that, you have to have the materials to repair it be locally sourced and stockpiled and ready to go. So those are some of the ways where you can do a resilient approach, understand that, yeah, the infrastructure is going to be out of commission for a very short amount of time, but it's not going to be expensive to repair and it can come back into service very quickly.
Yeah, Carol, your thoughts?
I did. And so I would actually layer on top of that a couple of additional pieces that I make sure that that bridge is not necessary for any of my emergency responders during the storm event, or that they have alternate paths to get to the places that they need to get to as part of your resilient planning. You look at that piece of infrastructure in isolation, but you also look at it as part of a system of systems. The other example that I would throw out there for everybody just to go do some research on after this is look at Tulsa, Oklahoma, and what they did. They were one of the first community rating system class 2 communities. They took an entire area of Tulsa that had been historically built in the floodplain, and through a series of years, probably decades, moved that entire community out and returned that floodplain to riparian. It's an amazing park. If you ever get to Tulsa, go experience it. It is an amazing public space that was a long-term approach to creating resilience in their community. So they're small examples and they're big examples all around.
Yeah, it's great points, great examples. So one thing to think about when we're thinking about capacity and resilience, we have to pay for it. So this is a way to transition over to Kurt. If you're available to turn your mic, there you go, and your camera on.
Sure.
We're going to talk about funding and paying for this stuff, right? That's what it's all about at the end of the day. So, and then once Kurt's done, then we'll have an opportunity for more discussion and Q&A. So, Kurt, take it away.
All right, Seth, thanks. Yeah, you can advance the slide. We can get going. Kurt Wolford, I'm the Executive Director for the Stormwater Management Commission in Lake County. Lake County is a suburb just north of Chicago. And we have a lot of drainage problems in Lake County, but we've been doing a lot of good projects to mitigate flooding in Lake County, and I'm happy to share some of our successes, some of the challenges we're facing, that we're all facing, and great to be here. So thanks for everyone attending. This picture on the right is a project that we just completed in the village of Lincolnshire. It's a storm sewer conveyance project. And as you can see, it's very large. You know, the largest infrastructure that's in our road right-of-ways are typically stormwater conveyance systems. The water mains, the sanitary sewers, the gas mains, fiber optics, and there's going to be more of that. There's even more types of utilities that are going to be in the right-of-ways in the future, especially with the demand on the energy grid. There's going to be a lot more utilities and utility conflicts. That's one thing we've experienced with a lot of the infrastructure work that we've been working on in Lake County is when the road's nicely paved and you don't really see what's underground, there was a tremendous amount of work that has been done underground, and there was a lot of utility conflicts that we ran into. And when you're trying to install these large infrastructure systems, the largest infrastructure in road right-of-ways, and these systems are even getting larger because of the increased rainfall, it's more challenging to get these large infrastructure systems installed. It takes up more than half the road right-of-way. So with the large attendance on the call today, I would really appreciate feedback. Just a comment, if you could, just do you think it's more cost effective to put in this infrastructure now, or would it be more cost effective to do it in the future when space is limited in these right-of-way areas? And we're in Lake County, so we're a suburb of Cook County and in the city of Chicago, but I can tell you now, down in Chicago, there are more utilities than you even know about in these right-of-ways, and it's very challenging to put in large systems like this. So my question to everyone is, it more cost effective to do this now or in the future? I appreciate your feedback on that. We can go to the next slide. But Scott was talking about capacity, and that, I agree with Scott, is probably the most important category. We need larger capacity to handle these larger storm events, to ensure our roads are not flooding. And Scott had a good cross section of the road, but it's really what's going on underneath the road. And not a lot of people appreciate that, but I know a lot of people on this call probably do. I did want to give a lay of the land of just what Lake County consists of, and they call it Lake County for a reason. And here's some statistics. We're up there at the northeast corner of Illinois, the very northeast corner. The Wisconsin state line is just to our north, and the drainage is from north to south. So we have two major river systems that drain into Lake County. We also have the headwaters of the North Branch of the Chicago River there. That's that watershed down in the lower right corner. That's where the Chicago River begins in Lake County, but it's a headwater area, so a lot of areas got filled in, a lot of the tributaries got filled in, and they were urbanized. So we have a lot of flooding problems all across the county, but especially in the North Branch, Chicago River watershed. The Lake Michigan watershed, we actually have a subcontinental divide right through our county. So the Lake Michigan watershed drains into our drinking water source, where we get our water to drink, and it's a very high quality resource that we want to protect. Lake Michigan is part of the Great Lakes system, and it takes, from what I've read, about 100 years for a drop of water in Chicago, that time of concentration, to leave Lake Michigan into Lake Huron. So we want to make sure that water quality is protected for a very long time. So the Lake Michigan watershed definitely has some very strong water quality protections. On the right side, you can see all the different water resources that consists. Another piece of information I thought would be helpful is to talk about our wetlands, and capacity also is what wetlands provide in Lake County. And it's been reported by the EPA that 1 acre of wetlands equals about 1 million gallons of potential stormwater storage. And that storage is taken up by the plants. There's evapotranspiration, there's infiltration, and there's also water quality benefits with wetlands. So wetlands are part of our natural drainage system, but we also have 72 municipal separate storm sewer systems, or MS4 communities, throughout Lake County. So it's a hybrid system of lakes, wetlands, streams, gray infrastructure, and 72 different MS4s. So water doesn't follow political boundaries, but we do work together. If you can go to the next slide, please. And while we're doing that, while you look at the upper right corner, well, we're already advanced. So I'll show you now what we recently experienced in the Chicagoland area are some heavy, localized, intense rainfall events that the stormwater systems cannot keep up with, which results in this pluvial flooding of urban flooding. Our stormwater systems are not designed for storms of today, and our rainfall standards were not also current. And we worked with the Illinois State Water Survey to update our rainfall standards. And you can look at some of these totals here. The image on the left is a couple years ago in Chicago, where this cell came and really targeted the Cicero, Berwyn, Oak Park area there. And we were watching that storm. It could have easily just shifted north into Lake County. And that's what happened on the image on the right, which was back in July of 2017. That was our record flood. We broke every record. We're record breaking on all the stream gauges. The River Forecast Center contacted us and said they couldn't even run their forecasts because their rating curves, they didn't have the data. It was a really bad event. But that one also in July, we had 8 to 10 inches of rain just drop onto entire communities within a 8 to 10 hour time period. And that's what happened also a couple years ago down in Cicero and Berwyn. So we're seeing these heavy, localized, intense rainfall events of 8 to 10 inches of rain dropping in 8 to 10 hours. So 8 to 10 and 8 to 10. And our design standards, for example, our detention basins historically have been sized for 6.5 inches of rain over a 24-hour period. So a lot more rainfall that we're dealing with, and that's obviously causing a lot of flooding through our areas. And you can go to the next slide. I did want to mention that the infrastructure and the capacity is undersized. Well, it needs to be upgraded to get that capacity, but how do you pay for it? So I guess I'll talk about what I'm here to talk about today. And our agency, when we were created, we always knew that it would take a mix of funding to get our project work done. There's no one source for how we manage stormwater. And here are some examples, and I'll get into some more on the next slide. But predominantly grants, we rely heavily on grants for the major projects. The county general fund does provide some funding for the smaller drainage projects we work on. User fee or utilities is not something we have, but a lot of communities in Lake County and nationally, we have seen that this is a more equitable fund that could be created to fund these types of infrastructures, these user fees or utilities. And then capital programs, we're working on right now the state of Illinois' largest capital program ever, and I have a slide on that. So we can go to the next slide. And while we're waiting, one of the asterisks down there for the grants, there's some certain words on that last slide, don't go back, but if you're filling out grant applications, currently you probably want to use some different terminology, and there's some hints on that other slide that you can use. But this slide here, this is from our comprehensive plan that we're updating. We haven't updated it since 2002, so it's been a while. And this is one part of it, is just what are the different mixes of funding that are out there. And this is outdated, so if you do have feedback, I'd appreciate any comments on this. But there it is at the top, the stormwater user fee, and these columns here show different categories. And we're supposed to manage stormwater at a county-wide level across those watersheds, not within certain regions, but county-wide. So how do we manage a county-wide program with the right amount of funding? And then the second column, equitable allocation of costs, not necessarily property tax based, but maybe impervious based or land value. The other categories are up there. The one that I get hung up on is the reliable funding source on the right. It's very hard to plan a long-term capital program, like a 10-year plan, without reliable funding. So the reliable funding areas, that's where we struggle. It's hard to, have a long-term plan when we're just working with grants. You can go to the next slide, please. Grants are amazing, they're great, but it's hard to do long-term planning. Here's some examples of our funding sources that we've been using. And the major one, the one there with the Illinois Department of Commerce and Economic Opportunity, that is, once in a generation type funding that we received. And I have a slide on that, so we'll talk about that. The FEMA, we have a lot of mitigation programs that we're running with FEMA. That's probably the most concerning funding category we have right now for obvious reasons, but we have been still moving forward. We haven't been told otherwise, and we have been receiving our reimbursements through FEMA, so that's great. The Illinois Department of Natural Resources is also a strong partner. We're working on another grant with them right now. And then EPA for these watershed plans and watershed projects. We're also going to be submitting another application for a watershed study through their 319 program. So that's on the grant side. And then on the internal side, you can go to the next slide because I will have individual slides for these, the SURF program and the WMB program, but these are our local grant programs that I'll get into some detail. This slide I do want to spend a little bit of time on because this was the largest grant that the county has ever received, and a total of $124 million in the appropriation through the Rebuild Illinois Capital Program. And this is a program that was started by Governor Pritzker back in 2019 when he was elected, and he's spent the largest amount on capital improvement to upgrade our infrastructure in Illinois, and stormwater is definitely a part of that. We do bear the brunt of the state of Wisconsin's drainage into Illinois. We have a Lake Michigan coastline, and we're upstream of the city of Chicago and Cook County. So we want to make sure we're doing the right thing to not only protect Lake County, but all the communities in Illinois. The Rebuild Illinois Capital Program, we had received a first initial round of $30 million. That went to 13 projects all over the county, shown on those dots. We benefited 2,300 properties and 25 roads. This round 2 project just kicked off last week. Or a couple weeks ago, we had our groundbreaking ceremony in the village of Wakanda. Everyone came out. We're excited to get started on round 2. And just yesterday, the governor signed the fiscal year 26 budget for the state of Illinois. And I do have some highlights I'd like to read from the state's budget that was just signed yesterday by the governor. It includes $1.66 billion in new and reappropriated funds from the IIJA water infrastructure programs. It also includes $431 million for the Federal Climate Pollution Reduction Grant Program. And this Rebuild Illinois program, in total since 2019, the state of Illinois has spent and expended $27.8 billion on infrastructure over the last 6 years. And now with the state budget that just passed, there's another $1.4 billion being authorized for the Rebuild Illinois program. There's also $60 million to continue the improvements at the Illinois State Beach Park. So a lot of great things going on throughout the state and in Illinois. You can go to the next slide, please. The programs that we administer locally through our general fund, and we've been doing this for 30 years, and this is our Watershed Management Board grant program, where we allocate some funds. It's not the large projects, but these are smaller projects where we work with homeowner associations, groups of property owners, even municipalities to implement drainage improvement, water quality projects. And it's been a success. It's a 50-50 cost match program. We are the grantor, so we receive applications on an annual basis, and then we award these funds, and we work closely with the applicant, whether it's an HOA or a local municipality. And that's how we effectively work on our drainage system, is through these partnerships. Next slide, please. So the WMB program, we've had that for about 30 years. This is our SURF program, our Stormwater Infrastructure Repair Fund. This has been around for about 20 years. This started really because of drain tiles. And we have a lot of drain tiles in agricultural areas that people thought drain tiles are storm sewers, and they're not. There's my timer. So I need to probably wrap it up soon, and I will. The SURF program is not a annual cycle, but we help cost match. It's also a 50% cost share, and we try to achieve a 10-year storm level. So a lot of the storm sewers are undersized, and with the increased rainfall, there's storm sewers that were designed as 10-year storm sewers 20 years ago, and now they're operating as a 5-year. There's some that are only 1 to 2 year level, and that's why we see a lot of street flooding. Next slide, please. And just I'll wrap it up here. When our agency was created, it said it will not work unless you have intergovernmental cooperation and partnerships. So that's how we've always operated. That's how we always will operate, and that's how we get our work done, is through these partnerships and mixes of funding. So there's not really a one clear answer to solve the problem, but this webinar and the report card and the emphasis to improve our stormwater grade, hopefully there's only one direction, and that's up from our current grade. So hopefully we'll get there, and I think a lot of great things are being done. And I'll hand it back to Seth. Thank you. There's our contact information if you ever want to reach out to us too.
Yep. Thanks, Kurt. I appreciate that. And if all the speakers could turn their microphones and cameras on, we've got about 10 minutes or so for some question and answers. So Darren, I don't know if you want to kind of take things away. There's a lot of questions I got, but that have come in, but you've got some questions too, I believe. So take it away, Darren.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions here. One of these came in, Seth. I hope I'm not stealing this one from your list, but I'll throw this one to Jamie because it deals, I think, with operations and maintenance. How is the industry reacting to and adopting stormwater innovations like real-time control?
You're muted.
Jamie, you're muted right now, I think.
So sorry about that. So you're talking about
at least once in the webinar too. So Jamie, so you were there or once. So.
Excuse me?
Go ahead, Jamie.
Oh, you were talking about real-time controls. That's kind of an emergent system. I don't know that we have a full handle on all the operational challenges. I guess it would be relative to whether it was a passive system or it was using kind of some of these advanced technologies that use the cloud and the Internet of Things. All those will play into long-term operation and maintenance. So if it's as simple as modifying the outlet structure to a detention or retention basin, that can be operated manually. That's going to be different than if it's automated with, some type of internal algorithm.
Great, thank you.
Can I add a little bit to that one? Because I do think that one of the things that we need to not stay in our silos about, and I heard I believe I heard you say that most of our stormwater systems are passive on purpose because it makes them more resilient. But we can tie our stormwater systems to some of the other emergency response. One of the things we did in Houston was we installed sensors in the underpasses that flood routinely and tied those to the traffic system such that the online mapping programs could display when we had flooding in roadways that would be, and I will tell you it's been hit or miss. It hasn't always worked, but that's deploying innovation in a way that is not necessarily making a innovation depend on a pump coming on, but it is innovation in helping inform people that are trying to get around with the most current available information of on ground status.
Well, and also just last thing, Scott, I'm thinking about capacity. Real-time controls, they optimize storage space is one of the things they do, right? So is that a way to get, when you have activated infrastructure, it's a way to increase capacity without rebuilding? Is that any thought on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I completely agree. I think that real-time controls have a real advantage to be able to take the existing kind of dumb infrastructure that we have and, for both water quality and for flood control to really, greatly enhance the efficiency and the effectiveness of it. I think the stumbling block, because it's there and I've seen it work and it works well. I think the stumbling block is that, it's capital. The city, county, state is the one that has to fund this program, and it's a heavy lift in terms of a capital investment. And there's just really not the money to do that, so you build the next dumb detention basin because the developer funds it. And, so at some point, it all keeps coming back to money. I love what you said, Seth. We have to pay for it. And that I think is really what's holding back real-time control right now is just the funding, because it's not something you roll out in one or two spots. You really need to roll it out in a watershed to make it useful.
Yep.
And I think when we look at the different criteria for grading and where is the stormwater grade, how do we get that grade to go up? Well, certainly things like funding is an obvious one that we've all talked about, but I think innovation is one that will be a key criteria for where we are in 4 years from now. When I look back 4 years, we didn't have all of like this, the two-dimensional modeling and the data, not only data collection, but data processing like we have now. So I wonder what can we do in the next 4 years through innovation to get our grade up? Question for Carol here.
Yeah, and on innovation, I just wanted to throw this in here on the question of innovation. I think it's interesting that nobody has talked about AI. So I'm kind of curious about how AI might be a positive disruptive thing. Maybe it's a negative disruptive thing in the context of innovation, Darren, to your point. So I just wonder if folks have thoughts about that.
I would just say all these choices are, also impact on how you staff your regional maintenance force. So, I think where I am, I see a lot of, maintenance stuff that needs someone to clear out the pipe or clear out the grate or, do relatively simplistic tasks. As we move and as we advance on kind of like the AI front, then you need more programmers. You need more people that would be, like looking at, SCADA reports or the data coming out of your system. So, the choice that you make directly informs how you're going to staff, the future of that's kind of control and manage the structures.
So I'll jump in here as somebody who was responsible for a pretty vast staff that I always say ranged from GED to PhD, and I think that where we need to we as an industry need to be leaning into where can AI make our jobs better on a daily basis. And quite frankly, the people that are on this webinar are not the people that are going to be the AI adopters, because I still think of a cell phone as a tool, not as an extension of my body. And it's one of those things that we need to bring the younger voices and the younger approaches and the younger mindsets and into these conversations. Not just hand it off, but there's a different problem solving approach that we see when you grew up with what I consider to be a tool as just a part of your day to day. I will always be a digital second language person. And how do we challenge some of these people that are using AI to like literally make their day to day better? To challenge them with some of the problems we're experiencing. Our infrastructure is not going to magically get smart. So just plugging into AI into our existing infrastructure is not going to get us there. But how does the other tools that we're using, the tablets, the phones, some of the smart equipment, are there other ways that we can use AI to our advantage that we're not thinking of? I put that challenge out there. Somebody out there's got a question that they're like, well, how come we don't? Well, bring that forward. That's how we're going to make those next steps and those jumps in innovation.
I guess I'll jump in and I'll say I'm totally not qualified to answer this, but I can tell you what we're kind of doing at the commission. We know that there's going to be new AI tools. We don't know what we don't know. But like any computer system, it's garbage in, garbage out. So we want to make sure we have really good garbage. Our data needs to be cleaned up, and that's what we're working on. We're trying to have a robust database of our all of the data that we want. And if there's AI tools that can, like these chat bots or just anything that can access the data and provide a summary or can do some analysis, well, what are they analyzing? So we wanted to ensure that we have at least a closed database of our information that's good and that's updated, not, oh, we're looking at that old rainfall. No, don't look at that old rainfall. Look at the new rainfall. So we're cleaning our data in preparation for tools to come online. And of course, there's going to be new and innovative tools, and AI is not going to go away. But the better that we can create that database of what we want the AI to fetch and to analyze, the better the output might be. And I know there's some AI models out there which you can toggle, like just access the internet. So it's going out to the web and gathering anything that can be scraped, and they'll give you some feedback. But you can also have some AI tools where I want you just to do your magic, but in this database, which we have lots of stormwater data. Everyone has lots of data, but you want to have good data. So I'm not sure what's coming, but we want to be prepared for it.
All right. Well, just for the sake of time, I want to thank everybody for all of our speakers here, and see if we've got, Scott, if you have any thoughts that you want to wrap up over the next couple of minutes as we kind of tie this all together thematically.
Yeah, on behalf of ASCE and NMSA, National Municipal Stormwater Alliance, thanks everybody for attending. We appreciate it. The importance of, or I guess the business case for the ASCE Infrastructure Report Card, in my opinion, is really three things. Number one, it's public awareness. If there isn't public awareness and understanding of the stormwater industry and sector, you're not going to get any money. And as Seth said, we have to pay for it. So that's the biggest thing this report card does. I mean, it's cited by national media. It gives us the public awareness we need. And also it gives us an assessment of an importance infrastructure from a trusted source. I think everybody really trusts ASCE because we're kind of like universities in that respect. You know, we're viewed as looking out for the public good. And lastly, and I think also importantly, it allows us to track trends. You know, you're doing this report card every 4 years, and we can see if we're getting better or we're getting worse. And that should probably inform the politicians then that they need to put a little more emphasis on certain things. So at the end of the day, it's PR. All right. As engineers, we do a crappy job with PR. We don't like to do public speaking or talk to people or ask for things, but we need to. And, you know, because this is important. So at NMSA, we partnered with ASCE to get stormwater as an independent category. It used to be buried under water and wastewater. And that was all 100% to boost the public profile of stormwater infrastructure. Again, with the goal of making your job easier to allow you to get money to run your program. So, as Carol said, please, if there's any ideas for helping us to do that more effectively and more efficiently, you know, plug it into Chat GPT or Gemini, I don't care. But we want to hear from you, you know, as we move forward as a sector. So, yeah, we're trying here to help everybody move the ball down the field. And with that, I appreciate you attending and thanks again. I'll turn it back to Seth.
Yeah, well, thanks for all the speakers and thanks for everyone's time. We had over 400 people join us today. It was a great conversation. We had tons of great questions. Couldn't get to nearly, you know, half of them actually. So appreciate all the engagement that you guys have, and we'll try to get some kind of responses to these questions as we can. You'll be seeing a certificate via email after this attending this event. And again, we appreciate it, and have a great rest of the day.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.